Ukraine annihilates entire North Korean reinforcements to Russia. At 5:13 a.m. on April 22, 2025, west of Kursk, Russia, silence fell. But not the silence of peace. It was the silence that followed destruction. In just 91 seconds, 3 rockets fired from a launcher no bigger than a truck reduced an entire North Korean artillery regiment to ashes. 60 men, 3 massive Koksan guns, and thousands of pounds of ammunition, all gone before dawn. How could this destruction happen so quickly? How could a single pinpoint strike shatter the image of Moscow's reinforcements and expose Pyongyang's pride as nothing more than bent steel? More importantly, what message was Ukraine trying to send to the world? This was no ordinary battle. It was a show of force, a reminder that in the third year of the war, survival is no longer measured in troops or firepower, but in seconds. And the question hanging over every capital from Moscow to Washington is simple. How will the next 91 seconds pass? I'll show you all. At 5:13 a.m., west of Kursk, the pre-dawn air trembled with a silence so heavy it seemed unnatural. Just 122 seconds earlier, 3 HIMARS rockets had streaked across the sky, traveling nearly Mach 3, before plunging into the forest clearing where Russia had hidden its newest asset, an artillery regiment staffed by North Korea's elite gunners. Each warhead carried over 200 pounds of high explosive, enough to obliterate steel in an instant. When they struck, the earth convulsed with fire, shockwaves flattening pines across a 300-yard radius. Inside Russia's forward command post, encrypted radios lit up. Officers barked call signs, demanding a response from the Koksan battery. Nothing came back. No telemetry, no thermal signatures, not a single GPS ping from the crew's wrist devices. In modern warfare, even the smallest malfunction produces trace signals. But this was worse than jamming or interference. It was void, the kind of absence that follows total destruction. The commanders froze. They knew what this meant. An entire artillery regiment, 3 170mm Koksan guns, 3 ammunition trucks, and nearly 60 men had been erased in less than 2 minutes. Not damaged, not scattered, erased. The word annihilation whispered through the bunker like a curse. Far above, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone hovered silently, its camera transmitting the truth to Kyiv in real time. The feed showed wreckage scattered like children's toys. One gun barrel, nearly 30 feet long, had been ripped from its carriage and hurled into the tree line. Ammunition trucks were nothing but twisted frames, their cargo of shells ignited in a secondary detonation that spiked temperatures above 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Not a single body moved. For Ukraine's operators, the strike was a clinical success. 3 rockets, 91 seconds, 100% kill ratio. A precision act that accomplished in moments what once required hours of artillery duels. For Russia, it was humiliation. For North Korea, catastrophe. Moscow had touted Pyongyang's support as proof of international strength. Now, their vaunted reinforcements had been reduced to a smoldering scar in the Kursk forest. The stillness that followed was more terrifying than the blast. No counter-battery fire, no distress signals, only the quiet rustle of smoke drifting upward. In that silence, a truth became undeniable. In modern war, survival isn't about size or numbers, it's about seconds. And in just 91 of them, an entire regiment had ceased to exist. What do you think of this destruction? Let me know in the comments. At 5:16 a.m., 3 minutes after the final rocket struck, the Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, barely larger than a backpack with wings no wider than a dining table, circled over the target zone. Its camera feed streamed back to Kyiv in high-definition clarity. What it revealed was not a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The drone's sensors scanned the clearing where Russia had stationed its imported North Korean battery. Where once stood 3 170mm Koksan self-propelled guns, each weighing nearly 30 tons, there was now only scorched debris. One barrel, thick as a man's torso, lay split in half, flung more than 200 yards into the forest. Another was bent at an impossible angle, the steel glowing red from temperatures that had peaked over 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit during detonation. The ammunition trucks had fared no better. Each had carried nearly 20,000 pounds of shells and propellant charges, but now they were reduced to blackened husks. One explosion had been so violent that fragments of a truck's chassis were later found embedded in tree trunks more than 40 feet above ground. Flames still licked at the shattered metal, sending columns of smoke spiraling into the sky. And the men, the 60 North Korean artillerymen who had been deployed to prove Pyongyang's loyalty to Moscow, were gone. Not captured, not wounded, gone. Thermal scans revealed no movement, no heat signatures beyond the fires. It was as if the regiment had been erased from the earth, their presence marked only by helmets melted into pools of slag and personal weapons twisted like wire. For the Ukrainian operators watching from their darkened command room, the silence on the radio feed was matched by the cold precision on their screens. They logged the destruction. 3 artillery pieces destroyed, 3 ammunition carriers neutralized, 100% casualty rate. It was a clean strike, the kind planners dream of but rarely see in reality. Back in Moscow, Russian officers who received the first fragments of imagery understood immediately what had happened. This wasn't a setback, it was an extinction event. One more symbol of Russia's desperation, the reliance on foreign guns, foreign crews, had been reduced to ash before it ever fired a single round. The drone circled once more, its lens capturing the skeletal remains of the clearing. The craters, each 30 feet wide, still smoking. The toppled pines crushed like matchsticks. The eerie emptiness where men and machines had stood. In less than 5 minutes, a place that had once buzzed with engines, orders, and human life had become nothing more than a scar etched into the Kursk forest. And from above, the message was unmistakable. This was not war as usual. This was precision warfare, and it left nothing behind. Support us by liking and subscribing to our channel. By sunrise, the shockwaves of the Kursk strike had already reached Moscow. Reports filtered upward through fractured channels, and within hours, the Russian General Staff issued the order. All Koksan deployments to the Western Front were to be halted indefinitely. What had once been paraded as a decisive reinforcement, North Korea's heaviest long-range artillery, was now treated as a liability. The loss of just 3 guns was not about numbers, it was about credibility. Russia had spent months boasting that Pyongyang's support would tip the scales. Now those same guns had survived less than 2 minutes under Ukrainian fire. For North Korea, the humiliation was even sharper. The Kim regime had broadcasted their alliance on state television, declaring that their exported artillery would prove the strength of their iron brotherhood with Moscow. They had even released propaganda footage showing the Koksan guns rolling through Red Square as symbols of power. Now, those symbols lay scattered in a Russian forest, reduced to 30 tons of twisted scrap metal per gun. The most elite gunners Pyongyang had trained, nearly 60 men hand-picked for loyalty and skill, had been annihilated without firing a single round. The psychological blow was immense. For the 15,000 North Korean troops still stationed on Russian soil, the message was brutal. They were not reinforcements, they were targets. Every barracks, every convoy, every artillery pit could be next. Soldiers whispered that Kursk was not a battle, but a warning. In Moscow's corridors of power, silence replaced bravado. Generals who once celebrated foreign reinforcements now questioned whether bringing in allies had only painted larger bullseyes across the map. In Pyongyang, censors scrambled to suppress the truth, but fragments of imagery leaked online. Gun barrels bent like straws, trucks melted into the soil, helmets fused into the wreckage. What was intended as a symbol of unity between Russia and North Korea had instead become a shared humiliation. Kursk was not just the death of a battery, it was the death of an illusion. Don't leave yet. I will show you the humiliation of the Russian army. The strike on Kursk was not followed by speeches or official statements from Kiev. There were no parades, no victory broadcasts. Ukraine did not need words. The silence after the rockets spoke louder than any declaration. For Moscow, the message was immediate. Every weapon delivered to Russia was now a legitimate target. For Pyongyang, the warning was historic. Their troops had crossed a border into someone else's war, but their survival could not be guaranteed for even a single night. Behind the precision of the strike lay a deeper truth. Ukraine had launched only 3 rockets, no more, no less. Each missile cost less than $150,000, but together they had destroyed equipment worth over $50 million and ended the lives of 60 foreign gunners. The ratio was staggering, a 300-to-1 return on destruction. That arithmetic alone told the world what Kyiv was trying to prove. Ukraine could bleed Russia without bankrupting itself. And yet, anyone watching closely could see the fingerprints of Washington. The rockets were American-made HIMARS munitions. The targeting data came from satellites no larger than a minivan, orbiting hundreds of miles above Earth, relaying coordinates within inches of accuracy. Even the reconnaissance drone that guided the final adjustments had been trained under NATO doctrine. Washington had not pressed the launch button, but it had given Kyiv everything necessary to ensure the strike was flawless. It was in essence a silent partnership. Kyiv provided the will, Washington provided the reach. Together they had executed a statement far louder than a press release. Restraint has limits. Russia's reliance on foreign allies offered no shield. North Korea's presence on the battlefield offered no immunity. If weapons appeared in Ukraine, they would burn in Ukraine, no matter who supplied them. In the Kremlin, officials who once mocked Ukraine's dependence on Western arms now confronted the irony. It was that very partnership that had carved a hole in Russia's defenses. In Pyongyang, what was meant to be a proud display of solidarity had turned into a funeral without bodies to bury. The Kursk strike was not just a battlefield maneuver. It was a message delivered in fire and silence, co-signed by Kyiv and Washington. The cost of escalation will always outweigh the gain. In the 72 hours that followed the strike, NATO's forward observers reported a remarkable change. Long-range artillery fire from Russian positions dropped by nearly 40%, as batteries that once hammered Ukrainian defenses fell silent, fearing they too might be marked for annihilation. Kursk had shown that survival could not be measured in fortifications or distance, but in seconds. Across Russia, despite heavy censorship, images of the aftermath spread like wildfire on encrypted channels. Leaked photographs showed gun barrels twisted like children's toys, craters 30 feet wide, and helmets fused into slag. On social media, Russians asked the question their own government dared not. If Ukraine can strike this deep, this fast, and this quietly, where will they strike next? The silence of Kursk had grown into an echo that shook the Russian public as much as the military. For North Korea, the damage was no less severe. State broadcasters tried to bury the story, but satellite imagery and intercepted chatter painted a truth too heavy to suppress. Families of the lost gunners demanded answers. Why had their sons been sent 4,000 miles away to die in someone else's war, erased in less than 2 minutes? Kursk was not only a battlefield loss, it was a political scar that Pyongyang could not hide forever. Analysts across the globe seized on the implications. The strike had not been a large-scale offensive, nor an escalation. It was a pinpoint intervention designed to rewrite the rules of engagement. Ukraine had proved that with precision, coordination, and patience, even the most secret reinforcements could be turned into targets. In the quiet forests west of Kursk, the wreckage still smoldered, rusting beneath blackened pine. It stood as proof that modern war does not always roar. It can whisper, and that whisper can kill. And for generals, adversaries, and observers alike, one haunting question remained: where will the next 91 seconds fall? The Kursk strike will not be remembered for its size, but for its precision. In just 91 seconds, Ukraine transformed a quiet forest into a graveyard and sent a shockwave across continents. 3 rockets, costing less than the price of a fighter jet's engine, had erased weapons worth tens of millions and silenced 60 of North Korea's most prized gunners. It was not simply a battlefield victory, it was a statement etched in fire and silence. For Russia, it was humiliation. For North Korea, it was historic shame. And for the international community, it was a reminder that in this war, escalation does not wait. It is eliminated. The Kursk forest now stands as a scar and a warning, proof that in modern warfare, survival is measured not in fortresses or armies, but in seconds. Yet the strike also raises a chilling question. If Ukraine, with Western support, can reach this far, this fast, and this quietly, then where will the next 91 seconds fall? This is the reality shaping the war's 3rd year, and the lessons will echo long after the smoke clears. If you believe these stories matter, if you want the truth of this war preserved before it's erased, then help us. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Every voice, every click, every share helps us keep telling the stories the world needs to hear.